That also brings me to the question of the idea of gratification in what is a very, in the world of the arts. What is the role of the financial component in this whole process of gratification? Would you, for example, Vetrimaran, would you place awards and accolades and critical acclaim over mainstream box office success that translates literally into financial success in that sense of the word?
Okay, see, as a filmmaker, my primary concern would be, of course, leaving out the kind of films I'm convinced in making, my primary concern would be to get back the money to my investor with the minimum of his interest at least. Like, he has to recover the money with the interest that he has invested, or else I'm not going to get the next investor to do my film.
So that's which is very realistic, yeah.
So which is how I work. So that's my primary concern. That drives me. Whatever I do, I keep that in mind, and even a film like Visaranai, I make sure that my producer makes 100% profit out of it, and I module every film and the promotion style of every film in certain way so that it reaches the target audience, and I set up a platform, I set up a stage where the film grows and it promotes itself in certain way where the people want to come and watch the film. And I personally feel that awards and critical acclaim, it happens. You can't expect that to happen. It's as my mentor Balamendra always used to say that the commercial success of a film is an accident. So that way I also feel that awards and critical acclaim also most of the time are accidental. So we really can't be sure of why this happens and why certain things don't happen. It depends on a jury. Say some 10 people sitting and watching your film. If they connect with the film, then you're there. If you don't connect, if they don't connect, then you're not there. So that alone is not the scale of a good film or a not so good film. So that way the gratification comes when more investors are interested in working with you, more actors are interested in working with you, and the biggest gratification or the satisfaction of a filmmaker is your investor doesn't ask for the script that you're going to make, the actor doesn't want to know the story that you're going to tell, but still they want to be part of the film. That's the biggest thing.
Vetrimaran, the craft of filmmaking is something that obviously you're a master at. But what about, how do you think you understand you talked about promotions and you know how to promote a film. That is another skill altogether. How do you ensure that craft of promoting a film in a way that your investor is not going to discuss anything? How do you enable that?
Like every script has to be written certain way and filmed certain way. So every film has to be, or every film's promotion has to be scripted in a certain way. So Kakamuttai needed certain kind of promotion. Visaranai needed a totally different kind of promotion. Though we chose to go to the festival route and come back to the mainstream market, still we chose to do these things in a different way for both the films. And Kodi is another film that I produced which didn't need this kind of promotion. It needed another kind of promotion, the conventional promotion which we did. So it's like every time you see a film, you start thinking about the film. What is the selling or the USP of this film? How do I reach this to the people? There are certain films that you could just use the social media to garner interest, create an interest for the people to come and watch, where the target audience are those who have access to a smartphone. There are certain films which has to go beyond those people, where I somewhere heard that there's only 11% of the Indian population has access to internet, smartphones, so to say. So if there are certain films that needs to go beyond those 11%. So those films need to be promoted in a certain way. So just taking the film and not not getting attached to the film because we made the film, like being brutally truthful about the film's limitations or its strengths, we arrive at a plan. And also the money part also comes into play. Like for a film like Visaranai or Kakamute, which is made on a shoestring budget, you can't be spending like 5 crores or 6 crores on promotion. We'll have to spend like 40 lakhs, 30 lakhs, 50 lakhs on promotion. So within the limited budget, how do you make that happen? So we have to take all these things into consideration and then work out on a plan.
Mati, I was going to ask you about how theatre isn't really a financially rewarding industry. It doesn't have the viewership of cinema. How have you been at it? Because I do know that you have, your company has a very, very fabulous formula that you've kind of mastered, and you're also moving into the digital space. You spoke about social media. Can you talk a little about that aspect?
Sure. So just to take off on the idea of promotions, just thinking about that. So I just, this idea of function allocation, if you think about, right, so which, in user experience, we say there are computers and there's man, right, and you give tasks accordingly. So for example, what is a human good at? Making decisions, mostly. What is a computer good at? Calculating. So how do you, but to optimize that ability to make a decision, in which case to watch a film or do something, people make decisions not based on numbers. We're not computers. We make decisions based on stories. So I think that's one of the major things that, I think the arts and culture can give a lot, is in the ability to tell people stories, why you should watch a film, or why you should use a product, or why this business is good. Those stories are the ones we don't remember, P&Ls, and we don't remember numbers at the end of a thing. We only remember Steve Jobs, a story around him.
Can you tell us one story, Mati, that inspired you perhaps, or like a story that resonates with you in some sense, or something that's current, doing the rounds?
I think, there are a few, but I guess when I think of Steve Jobs, I guess it's just the idea of someone who took his ideology of simplicity and minimalism and made it a product, right? So I went to buy a MacBook recently, and I chose the MacBook Air, even though it is more expensive than the MacBook Pro, because you're choosing a product for its function. It's minimalism. And I thought so, at a point, like that company had that story that he had sold us, it worked, and I made a decision based on that.
Yeah, and how you think that what you wear or what you carry is in a sense a reflection of who you are,
yes,
right? Your
yes.
identity in that sense.
Yes.
You're wearing your identity on your sleeve in some sense.
And those are the stories that we're really interested in, right? Those are the ones that we want to talk about, we want to share. And I think that's where there's probably a missing link. And coming to theatre, I guess I must say it was extremely stressful because, but then you've got to get beyond like getting angry, I guess. There are times when you just like, okay, there are 100 people. I've performed to 3 people in the audience, and you're like, you go back home, you think, why am I doing this? I remember a director of mine once told me, remember the show is for yourself. I said, yes, it's for myself. There is nobody there. And I remember at the interval, like somebody left, someone walked off, and I was like, wow, 33% of my audience just walked out right now. And but it goes on. But I think these are hard things that happen, and then it teaches you a lot, I guess. And now I can say that, but it does take a lot of the wind out of you. But the more you stick with it, you realize that you also have to innovate with the way that you are presenting yourself, innovate the way in which you are creating the content as well. And I think that's what has happened. And when you stick with it, like you realize that, okay, in Europe what happens? Okay, there are government grants. Can you go and try to get grants for it? Can you find patrons? Art has always had patrons, like be it a king, like saying, okay, make this painting or whatnot. It's always been there. So you start trying to evolve formula is a bad word, evolve yourself to understand how you can best, achieve your vision with respect to that. And one of the things we've done is, like, we've always wanted to take arts and culture, like local arts and culture abroad. So we do this thing which is very local, which is very a global content, but with a very local aesthetic. And that's something that we try to do very often. So all our plays are very Indian, but they are in English, so that, that boundary, at least for, when we go to the West, like people look at it and they kind of understand what we're trying to say. And there's also a lot of movement. So because movement is also, it's universal. You don't have to put language on it. So I think these are things that you evolve over a period of time to sort of communicate your story better.
Karthik, Mati spoke about innovation, and if I'm not mistaken, 2 years ago you created a sound of your own, and you created Indo Soul, drawing upon your own, influences in music and your primary anchor as classical music. Can you talk a little about Indo Soul itself and your journey with it?
Indo Soul has been about 4.5 years in the making. It was 2 years ago that we coined a term for it because we needed a term. For me, it's always interesting how there's Indian classical music, but we are wearing different clothes. Being in India, we are inherently Indian, but then there's a lot of access to the Western culture, and it's the same with music. So, being born into this sort of environment, it always felt like I had dual interests, like one in Carnatic music, which I started very early on in my life, but then there was also the Western music, like the English pop or the different genres of music. So it was always felt like how would it be if we bring both together, and I got to experience this when I was a freelancer working with different artists who had done things like this. So specifically with Indian classical music, I always felt like there is a lot of potential that so far hasn't been tapped. There's an ocean of potential in how we can get a sound that marries Indian classical music with other genres. And so in trying to create something like this was how Indo Soul was born. It's a very evolving medium. Our first album sounded, I was having a chat with my band members and we were talking about how our music has evolved so much, and when we listen to our first album, it sounds a bit raw. Now we are moving to a second and a third, and it's evolving because there's so much potential involved, and there's a lot of commonalities rather than differences, which is what the motive is. So for me, it's a collaboration between people from different musical cultures, and the sort of the meeting of minds where I get to understand another musician where he comes from, and he gets to understand where I've come from, and in that I feel there is something interesting that comes up, and that's what has been the journey so far, and that's how it's going to be.
Because we were going to be in a group of people who are in the business space, I just did a quick Google search on popular jargons in the world of business, and one of the jargons that I came across was, I have to refer to my notes for this, think big and start small. I wanted to ask Vetrimaran about how, in some sense, Visaranai went to the Oscars, selected for the Oscars. So, but all the content that you create is very, very rooted in a culture that is very, very homegrown around in the vicinity, right? So, do you believe that you feel the need to create content that you can, in some sense, empathize with, and believe in the power and the potential of that content to be able to resonate with an audience that is, that is so removed, in some sense, from, or do you believe that that content is universal, like Visaranai, for example? The craft of the filmmaking is, of course, fabulous. It could be any international film, but the content is still, it's rooted in Andhra Pradesh, and it's the, and Tamil Nadu. So talk to us about this whole, this portrayal of realistic culture and the ability to be able to take it to an audience that does not necessarily understand the milieu that it's rooted in.